The nanny cam I installed to watch our dog caught my mother-in-law doing something unforgivable in our bedroom. I installed the camera on Thursday to monitor Winston, our 13-year-old beagle who'd been having seizures. The small device sat on our bedroom bookshelf, angled to watch his bed in the corner. I synced it to my phone and left for my 24-hour shift at the fire station, feeling like a responsible dog owner. Winston had been with me since college, through 2 bad relationships and countless moves, and I wasn't ready to lose him. The camera felt like a way to hold on a little longer, to catch any warning signs before something irreversible happened. I checked the feed 3 times during my shift, watching Winston sleep peacefully, his chest rising and falling in the afternoon sunlight streaming through our window. Friday morning, I was reviewing footage from my shift when I saw my mother, Patricia, walk into our bedroom at 2:17 p.m. She had the emergency key we'd given her months ago when we first moved into the house. I watched her pull a men's dress shirt from her purse, expensive designer label, definitely not mine. I owned maybe 3 dress shirts total, all from department stores, and I knew every item in my closet. This shirt was the kind of thing I'd never spend money on. She hung it deep in my wife Simone's closet, behind winter coats we wouldn't need for months, positioning it carefully like she was staging a photograph. Then she tucked men's cologne in Simone's underwear drawer, hiding it beneath layers of fabric where Simone would never look, but where someone searching would definitely find it. The casual efficiency of her movements suggested this wasn't improvised. She knew exactly what she was doing, where to hide things, how to make it look like Simone had been careless about concealing evidence. She spent another 10 minutes in our bedroom, opening drawers, moving through our private space with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. She pulled out her phone and took photos of our bedroom from various angles, documenting the layout. Then she left, locking the door behind her, and Winston never even woke up through the entire intrusion. I sat on our couch staring at my phone screen, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. My mother had broken into our house, technically not breaking since she had a key, but the violation felt the same, and planted evidence of an affair that wasn't happening. My hands shook holding my phone. This was my mother, someone who claimed to love me, deliberately framing my wife of 8 months for adultery. I called in sick to my next shift, something I'd never done in 8 years with the department, and spent the weekend reviewing every second of footage from the past 2 weeks since I'd installed the camera. What I found made my stomach turn. Patricia had been visiting our house at least twice a week, always during work hours when Simone and I were guaranteed to be gone, always alone, initially. On October 3rd, she'd planted a receipt from the Grandview Hotel in Simone's coat pocket. The receipt was dated for a Monday afternoon when I knew Simone had been in back-to-back meetings at her accounting firm. On October 7th, she'd hidden a man's watch in our bathroom cabinet, tucked behind cleaning supplies where it wouldn't be found accidentally but would be discovered during a deliberate search. On October 10th, she'd brought my younger brother Cameron with her, and I watched them work together like a team. Cameron filmed on his phone while Patricia arranged men's clothing items throughout our bedroom. They discussed placement, arguing about whether a tie should go in the closet or dresser, with Cameron insisting it needed to look like Simone had hidden it hastily. The audio was the worst part. The camera picked up their conversation clearly as they worked. "She's been manipulating him since day one," Patricia said, smoothing out the tie she'd just placed in Simone's nightstand drawer. "Pregnant within a year? You watch. She'll trap him with a baby and bleed him dry." Cameron responded with something about protecting family assets, about how I was too blind to see what Simone really was. Patricia laughed, this cold sound I'd never heard from her before, and said, "The intervention is set for next Sunday. I've got enough evidence now. When Aaron sees all this, he'll have no choice but to believe she's been cheating. He'll leave her, and we can make sure she gets nothing in the divorce." My brother actually high-fived her. They celebrated their conspiracy against my wife in my bedroom while my elderly dog slept 15 feet away, oblivious to the evil unfolding around him. I watched them work for 20 more minutes, perfecting the staging, discussing strategy, planning my wife's destruction like it was a military operation. When they finally left, Cameron paused at the door and said, "Mom, you really think this will work?" Patricia's response was chilling. "Aaron's a good boy. He trusts his mother. When I show him all this evidence, he'll have to accept the truth about her." I needed to think strategically, to not react emotionally and give my mother warning that I knew about her scheme. Simone was at a weekend conference in Boston, wouldn't be back until Sunday evening. That gave me 2 days to figure out how to handle this before Patricia's planned intervention. I spent Saturday documenting everything, downloading all the camera footage, organizing it chronologically, building a timeline of every intrusion and every planted item. I went through our bedroom methodically, finding each piece of manufactured evidence: the cologne, the shirt, the tie, the watch, the hotel receipts. There were 9 items total, all carefully hidden in places that would look suspicious when discovered, but not obvious enough to be found accidentally. Patricia had even planted text messages on a burner phone she'd hidden under our mattress, complete with a contact labeled J and messages discussing meeting times and hotels. The messages referenced specific dates, times I could verify I'd been at the station on 24-hour shifts, times Simone could prove she'd been at work or with verifiable witnesses. The level of planning was staggering. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Patricia had spent weeks building a false narrative, collecting items, staging evidence, recruiting my brother as an accomplice. Every piece of evidence was designed to create an airtight case that Simone had been conducting an affair throughout our marriage. I felt sick imagining the intervention she'd planned, the moment she would have presented all this manufactured proof to me and our family, forcing me to confront my innocent wife based on elaborate lies. Sunday morning, I called my Aunt Teresa, Patricia's younger sister and the only family member who'd fully welcomed Simone into the family. Teresa had always been the rational one, the person who'd challenged Patricia's more extreme behaviors over the years. I asked her to come over, said I needed to show her something important, but couldn't discuss it over the phone. She arrived within an hour, concerned by the tone of my voice. I showed her everything, the footage, the planted evidence, the audio of Patricia and Cameron discussing their plan. Teresa's face went through several emotions: shock, disgust, and finally, rage. "That manipulative witch," she said, her voice shaking. "She's been poisoning Cameron against Simone since your engagement. I knew she was struggling with you getting married, but this is criminal. She's trying to destroy your marriage by framing an innocent woman." Teresa explained things I hadn't known, patterns I'd missed while being too close to the situation. Patricia had done something similar to my father before he died, had convinced herself he was cheating based on paranoid delusions, had made his last year miserable with accusations and surveillance. After he died when I was 16, she'd transferred all that obsessive energy onto me, her only remaining close male relationship. When I'd started dating seriously, she'd found reasons to dislike every girlfriend. But Simone was different. I'd actually married her, had actually chosen someone else as my primary partner. "Your mother can't handle not being the most important woman in your life," Teresa said. "She's convinced herself that Simone is the problem, rather than accepting that you're an adult with your own family now. And Cameron enables her because he's still living at home at 32, still financially dependent on her, still seeking her approval for everything." I asked Teresa what I should do. Part of me wanted to confront Patricia immediately, to rage at her for the violation and manipulation, but Teresa counseled patience. "She's planning this intervention for tonight, right? When Simone gets back from Boston?" I nodded. "Let her spring it. Let her show up here with whatever audience she's gathered. Let her present her manufactured evidence, and then you show everyone what she actually did. She needs to be exposed in front of family, needs to face consequences with witnesses present. Otherwise, she'll spin this, make herself the victim, claim you're choosing Simone over your own mother." Teresa was right. Public exposure was the only way to prevent Patricia from controlling the narrative later, from claiming I'd misunderstood or that the footage was somehow manipulated. I needed witnesses to see her cruelty in real time, to understand the depth of her manipulation. Simone's flight landed at 6 p.m. I picked her up from the airport, and she immediately knew something was wrong. "You look terrible," she said, studying my face. "Is Winston okay?" I assured her the dog was fine, then told her we needed to talk before we went home. We sat in the airport parking garage while I explained everything. The camera, the footage, Patricia's scheme, the planned intervention. Simone's face went pale, then red, cycling through emotions too fast to track. "She hates me that much?" Her voice cracked. "She's been in our bedroom touching my things, planting evidence to make you think I'm cheating? Aaron, that's insane. That's actually psychotic behavior." I took her hand, feeling her fingers trembling. "I know, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. All those comments she made about you, the way she'd always have some emergency when we had plans, how she'd call me crying whenever you and I had date nights. It was all part of this pattern of trying to keep us apart." Simone wanted to call the police immediately, wanted Patricia arrested for breaking and entering, for harassment, for something. But I explained Teresa's advice about letting the intervention happen, about exposing Patricia in front of family. "She's invited people tonight. Your Uncle Dennis, my cousin Rachel, probably Cameron, maybe others. She's planning this big dramatic reveal where she shows everyone the evidence and forces me to confront you about your fake affair. If we let her start that show, then expose her with the footage, everyone will see exactly who she is. No spin, no excuses, just her own actions caught on camera." Simone was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but I get to press charges afterward. Breaking and entering, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. I'm throwing every civil and criminal charge at her that will stick. She doesn't get to do this and walk away unpunished." We got home around 7:30. Teresa called to say Patricia had been contacting family members all afternoon, telling them to come to our house at 8 p.m. for an emergency meeting about my marriage. She'd framed it as an intervention to save me from a predatory wife, had told people she had proof of Simone's affair and needed family support to help me see the truth. Uncle Dennis had confirmed he was coming, along with Aunt Margaret and Cousin Rachel. Cameron would obviously be there, probably as Patricia's backup and witness to support her claims. I spent the 30 minutes before they arrived setting up my laptop in the living room, queuing up the footage in chronological order, preparing to present evidence like I was building a legal case. Simone sat on the couch, her face composed but her hands clenched into fists. "I can't believe we're about to let your mother accuse me of cheating in front of your family," she said. "Part of me wants to just kick her out the moment she walks in." I squeezed her shoulder. I know, but this is the only way to make sure everyone sees the truth at once. Otherwise, she'll spend the next year telling anyone who'll listen that you manipulated me, that you're keeping me from my family, that she was only trying to help. At 8 p.m. exactly, our doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia, Cameron, Uncle Dennis, Aunt Margaret, and Cousin Rachel crowded on our porch. Patricia's face was arranged in false concern, the kind of expression that looked caring but had calculation underneath. "Aaron, honey, we need to talk. Can we come in?" I stepped aside and let them file into our living room, watching Patricia's eyes sweep the room like she was assessing a battlefield. Simone sat on the couch, her spine straight, her face carefully neutral. Patricia barely glanced at her, instead focusing on me with this wounded mother expression. "Aaron, this is so hard for me, but I've discovered something that's breaking my heart. As your mother, I can't stay silent when I know you're being betrayed." She gestured to Cameron, who pulled out his phone like they'd rehearsed this moment. "We have evidence that Simone has been unfaithful. I know you love her, but you deserve to know the truth." Cameron started describing what they'd found: the shirt in the closet, the cologne in the dresser, the hotel receipts. He made it sound like they'd discovered these items accidentally, like Patricia had been helping us organize our closet as a surprise and stumbled onto suspicious items. Patricia added dramatic details about how she'd been worried about our marriage for months, how she'd noticed Simone acting distant, how she'd felt compelled to investigate for my own protection. "I found a phone hidden under your mattress," Patricia said, pulling the burner phone from her purse with latex gloves like it was evidence in a crime scene. "The messages on here are explicit, Aaron. Meeting times, hotel rooms, things she's doing with another man while you're on shift. I'm so sorry, baby, but you needed to know." She held the phone out to me, her face a mask of maternal concern. Uncle Dennis and Aunt Margaret looked uncomfortable, Rachel looked skeptical, and Cameron looked triumphant. This was their moment, their intervention to save me from my terrible wife. I took the phone from Patricia, pretended to look at the messages, let my face show shock and hurt exactly as she'd want. Then I looked at Simone, who was sitting perfectly still, her eyes on me, trusting me to handle this. "This is pretty damning evidence," I said slowly. "I can see why you'd be concerned." Patricia's face lit up with relief. "I knew you'd understand once you saw the proof. Honey, you deserve so much better than someone who would betray you like this. We can help you through the divorce. Make sure she doesn't take advantage of you financially. Cameron's already spoken to a lawyer." I cut her off. "Except there's one problem with all this evidence." I walked to where my laptop sat on the coffee table, opened it so the screen faced the room. "None of it is real. I know it's not real because I watched you plant every single item." The room went silent. Patricia's face froze mid-expression, confusion replacing concern. "What are you talking about?" I pressed play on the first video, the footage from October 3rd showing Patricia entering our bedroom with her large purse. The timestamp was visible, as was the camera angle showing her pulling out the hotel receipt and placing it in Simone's coat pocket. "I installed a camera to monitor Winston while we're at work. He's been having seizures and I wanted to keep an eye on him. But the camera also captured you breaking into our house and planting evidence of an affair that doesn't exist." I fast-forwarded to the next video, Patricia hiding the cologne in the dresser. Then the next, her and Cameron discussing their plan, their voices coming clearly through the laptop speakers. "She's been manipulating him since day one, pregnant within a year, you watch." Patricia's own voice filled our living room, saying words she'd clearly forgotten were being recorded. Uncle Dennis stood up, his face red. "Patricia, what the hell is this?" Aunt Margaret was staring at the screen in horror as the video showed Cameron and Patricia high-fiving after successfully hiding a dress shirt in Simone's closet. Rachel looked between her aunt and the laptop, her mouth open in shock. I played all the footage, every intrusion, every planted item, 15 minutes of irrefutable evidence that Patricia had spent weeks building a false narrative. The audio captured her calling Simone a gold digger, discussing the intervention plan, celebrating their conspiracy. When the final video finished, I closed the laptop and looked at my mother. "You framed my wife for cheating. You broke into our house repeatedly, violated our privacy, and manufactured evidence to destroy my marriage. And you brought family here tonight to humiliate Simone based on your lies." My voice was steady, but rage burned underneath every word. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to manipulate me anymore." Patricia's face cycled through several expressions. Shock, anger, fear, then finally desperation. "You don't understand. I was protecting you. She's not who you think she is. I'm your mother, Aaron. I know what's best for you." Her voice rose, becoming shrill. "That footage doesn't show the whole picture. I had reasons to be suspicious. She's isolated you from your family. She's changed you. Simone stood up, her voice cutting through Patricia's excuses like a blade. "I've isolated him? You call him 15 times a day. You show up unannounced constantly. You fake emergencies to interrupt our plans. You've tried to sabotage our marriage since the day we got engaged. And when none of that worked, you decided to frame me for adultery, because you can't handle the fact that your son loves someone besides you." The room was so quiet I could hear Winston snoring in our bedroom, oblivious to the confrontation happening 20 feet away. Cameron tried to defend their mother. "We were just trying to look out for Aaron. Mom was worried and I agreed to help her investigate. Rachel cut him off, her voice harsh. You helped her commit a crime. That's what this is. Breaking and entering, planting evidence, conspiracy to interfere with a marriage. You both could be charged criminally for this. She looked at me, her face serious. Aaron, I'm a paralegal. What they did violates multiple laws. If Simone wants to press charges, she'd have a strong case. And the civil liability, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, invasion of privacy, they'd be looking at serious damages. Patricia lunged for the laptop like she could somehow undo the evidence by destroying it, but Uncle Dennis stepped between her and the table. Don't make this worse, Patricia. You've done enough. His voice was disgusted. I can't believe you'd stoop this low. Aaron's happy, his wife is good for him, and you tried to destroy that because of your own issues? That's not love. That's control. Aunt Margaret was crying, looking at her sister-in-law with something like horror. My God, Patricia, David would be ashamed of you. Invoking my dead father's name made Patricia flinch, but she recovered quickly, her face hardening into defensive anger. You don't know what it's like. None of you. He's all I have left. After David died, Aaron was the only good thing in my life, and she took him away from me. Patricia pointed at Simone with a shaking finger. I did what I had to do to get my son back. The admission hung in the air, stark and undeniable. She wasn't even denying the scheme anymore, just justifying it with grief and possessiveness. I felt something break inside me, the final thread of obligation to this woman who'd raised me, but who'd become someone I didn't recognize. I'm not a possession you can keep, Mom. I'm a grown man with my own life, and you just destroyed any relationship we might have had left. I told everyone to leave except Simone and me. Patricia tried to argue, tried to force a conversation about understanding her perspective, but Uncle Dennis physically guided her toward the door. Cameron followed silently, his earlier triumph replaced with pale recognition that they'd been caught in an indefensible act. Aunt Margaret hugged Simone on her way out, whispering an apology for her sister-in-law's behavior. Rachel gave me her business card and said to call her if we needed help with legal action, that she'd testify to what she'd witnessed if necessary. When the door finally closed behind them, the house fell silent, except for Winston's continued snoring. Simone collapsed onto the couch, her composed facade crumbling as adrenaline drained away. She started crying, these huge gasping sobs that shook her whole body. She was going to ruin my life. She was going to make everyone think I cheated on you. My reputation, my career, everything, gone, because she can't let go of her adult son. I held Simone while she cried, feeling my own rage settle into cold determination. Patricia had shown me exactly who she was, and I believed her. This wasn't a mistake, or a moment of poor judgment. This was calculated, sustained manipulation over weeks. She'd involved my brother, had planned an elaborate public humiliation, had planted evidence with the specific goal of destroying my marriage. That required a level of malice I couldn't forgive or forget. When Simone finally calmed down, we discussed next steps. She wanted to change our locks immediately, wanted the emergency key back from Patricia, wanted a restraining order. I agreed to all of it. We called a 24-hour locksmith who arrived within an hour and rekeyed every lock on our house. I texted Patricia that her key no longer worked, and that she was not welcome in our home anymore under any circumstances. Her response came in seconds, a wall of text about overreacting and misunderstanding, and how she was still my mother and deserved respect. I blocked her number. Monday morning, Simone met with Rachel to discuss legal options. They filed for a restraining order based on the breaking and entering, the harassment campaign, and the threat of continued interference in our lives. The judge granted a temporary order immediately after reviewing the camera footage, requiring Patricia to stay at least 500 feet from our home, Simone's workplace, and any location where we were present. Simone also filed a civil lawsuit seeking damages for emotional distress, defamation, and invasion of privacy. Rachel explained it might take a year or more to go through the courts, but the evidence was so overwhelming that Patricia's lawyer would likely recommend settlement. She doesn't want this going to trial, Rachel said. Discovery would mean deposing Cameron, potentially revealing more about their conspiracy. Most defendants in cases this clear-cut settle to avoid public trial. Cameron called me 3 days after the intervention, his voice small and defensive. Mom's devastated. She's not eating, barely sleeping. The family has sided against her. You've destroyed her life over a misunderstanding. I felt no sympathy, just cold anger at his continued enablement. She destroyed her own life by committing crimes against my wife, and you helped her. You filmed her planting evidence. You celebrated their scheme with her. You're just as guilty, Cameron. The only reason we haven't included you in the restraining order is because Mom led this operation. But don't think for a second that I've forgotten your role. Cameron tried to argue that family loyalty required standing by her. I told him that family loyalty didn't extend to criminal conspiracy, and that he needed to figure out whether he wanted to be a 32-year-old man or Patricia's eternal child. Then I hung up and blocked his number too. 3 weeks after the intervention, Patricia showed up at my fire station during my shift. She violated the restraining order to stand outside the bay doors, calling my name, demanding I listen to her side of the story. My captain called the police while I stayed inside, watching through the window as my mother cried and shouted about forgiveness and family. The police arrived and arrested her for violating the protective order. She spent the night in jail before being released on bond with an ankle monitor that would alert authorities if she came within range of any restricted locations. The arrest seemed to finally break through her denial. Her lawyer contacted Rachel to discuss settlement terms for the civil suit, acknowledging that continuing to fight would result in criminal charges stacking up alongside the civil liability. Patricia agreed to pay $50,000 in damages, to continue therapy with a court-appointed psychologist specializing in family dysfunction, and to have no direct or indirect contact with Simone or me for a minimum of 2 years. The settlement felt like justice, though no amount of money could undo the violation we'd experienced. Simone and I started couples therapy to process the betrayal and violation we'd experienced. Our therapist, Dr. Amanda Vega, helped us work through the trust issues, not between us, but in our ability to trust others, to feel safe in our own home, to believe that family wouldn't weaponize love. Simone admitted she'd started having nightmares about Patricia breaking in at night, about waking up to find her standing over our bed. The violation of knowing someone had touched her intimate belongings, had rifled through her underwear drawer to plant evidence, had photographed our bedroom. It created a sense of contamination that took months to fade. We eventually moved to a different house, partially for a fresh start and partially because neither of us could fully relax in a space Patricia had invaded so thoroughly. Winston came with us, his health stabilizing with new medication, oblivious to the role his monitoring camera had played in exposing the conspiracy. Uncle Dennis reached out 6 months later to say Patricia had been attending therapy consistently and seemed to be making progress understanding her behavior. He asked if I'd be willing to have supervised contact, maybe just a conversation in his presence. I declined. The truth was that Patricia had shown me who she really was when she thought no one was watching. She'd revealed the lengths she'd go to maintain control, the depth of her willingness to harm innocent people to get what she wanted. That person, the one who'd high-fived my brother after successfully framing my wife, was Patricia's true self. Whatever remorse she felt now was likely just grief over losing access to me, not genuine understanding of the harm she'd caused. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. Maybe that made me unforgiving or cold, but I'd rather be cold than allow someone who'd proven themselves dangerous back into our lives. Cameron sent a letter a year after the intervention, the only communication that got through because it came via Rachel's office. He apologized for his role in the scheme, admitted he'd been too dependent on Patricia's approval, said he'd moved out of her house and was working on his own issues with a therapist. He didn't ask for forgiveness or relationship reconciliation, just acknowledged the harm he'd caused and took responsibility for his choices. I appreciated the letter more than I expected, though I didn't respond. Cameron had made his choices as an adult, had actively participated in trying to destroy my marriage, and while I could acknowledge his apology, I felt no obligation to welcome him back into my life. Simone and I had our first child, a daughter we named Isabel, 2 years after the intervention. We didn't tell Patricia, didn't send announcements to that side of the family, just quietly welcomed our baby into a life free from manipulation and drama. Aunt Margaret and Uncle Dennis knew, visited regularly, became the kind of grandparents our daughter deserved, people who celebrated our family without trying to control it. Rachel became a close friend, someone we trusted implicitly after watching her stand up for us when it mattered. The family that remained after cutting out Patricia was smaller but healthier, relationships built on genuine care rather than obligation or guilt. Winston lived to see Isabel's first birthday, passing peacefully in his sleep at 14 years old. I was grateful he'd been the reason for installing that camera, grateful his health crisis had accidentally exposed Patricia's scheme before it reached fruition. In a strange way, that elderly beagle had saved my marriage by simply existing in the frame while evil unfolded around him. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't installed that camera, if I'd come home to Patricia's intervention without any evidence to counter her planted affair narrative. Would I have believed her? Would I have doubted Simone even for a moment? The thought made me sick, because I couldn't be certain. Patricia knew me well enough to build a case she thought would be convincing, had timed the intervention for maximum impact, had recruited family witnesses to pressure me into accepting her version of reality. Without the footage, it would have been my wife's word against manufactured evidence, and Patricia had correctly calculated that I might waver in the face of such seemingly concrete proof. That's what made her scheme so vicious. She'd weaponized my love for Simone against me, had tried to turn that love into doubt and eventually hatred. The casual cruelty of it still took my breath away. 5 years after everything happened, Simone and I were stronger than ever, our marriage forged in the fire of Patricia's betrayal and emerging unbreakable. Isabel was thriving, a happy kindergartner who knew her grandmother Teresa and great-uncle Dennis, but had never met Patricia. We'd built a life free from manipulation, surrounded by people who loved us, without conditions or schemes. Winston's old camera still sat in a box in our garage, a reminder of how close we'd come to destruction. and how accidentally we'd escaped it. Sometimes the smallest decisions, installing a camera to watch an elderly dog, end up saving everything that matters. Patricia never contacted us again after the settlement. Whether from genuine remorse or legal obligation, we'd never know. And honestly, we didn't care to find out. Some chapters close permanently, and that's exactly how they should stay. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now, and let me know your take in the comments.